This is Brenna Quigley, your personal geologist and terroir guide. Join me on a road trip through the geologic history of your favorite wine regions around the world. This is Roadside Terroir. Season 2, Burgundy's Côte d'Or, is made possible by our Season 2 partners, Becky Wasserman and Company, La Palais, and Acker Wines. This episode is sponsored by our dear friends at Lone Wolf Imports. Established in 2018 in Portland, Oregon, the mission of Lone Wolf Imports is to share exceptional Old World wines with wine lovers throughout the Pacific Northwest. Among its varied passions is a focus on Burgundy, where Lone Wolf proudly represents over 35 growers, ranging from rising stars to prominent icons. I first met Tim Davey of Lone Wolf over dinner with Becky Wasserman in Bouillon back in 2017, and our spirits instantly aligned. Lone Wolf sees their role in importing wines as that of educators rather than salespeople, and this philosophy shines through in everything they do. We're determined to keep this content free and accessible for everyone. If you'd like to support our show, please consider becoming an insider. Insiders have access to lots of cool stuff, including extra photos, travel guides, and extended interviews with our guests. To learn more, visit our website, roadsideterroir.com. Please don't drink and drive, and remember to keep your eyes on the road. This episode contains explicit language. Today, we continue our journey through the terroirs of the Côte de Nuits, all the way to its northernmost border. We begin in the famed Gevrey Chambertin, where we walk through our final Grand Crus. We then continue north to the lesser-known but up-and-coming villages of Fixin and Marsannay, where vineyards suddenly collide with the urban sprawl of the city of Dijon. On this leg of our journey, we'll go from the top dogs to the underdogs, explore how finances and world wars have shaped landscapes, and begin to set our sights on the future of the Côte d'Or. Even though much of the Côte de Nuits feels quite grand, when we think of the famous villages here, there are really only 3 that have been truly famous in recent history: Vosne-Romanée, Chambol-Musigny, and Gevrey-Chambertin. We've spent a good amount of time discussing the silky, discreet side of the Côte de Nuits, such as Romanée-Conti or Musigny. But today, we're going to focus on that other pinnacle of Pinot Noir, the pinnacle of power. Here's Paul Wasserman.
Sure. So, Gevrey has the reputation of producing fairly deep, fairly structured, fairly powerful wines. And in many cases, it's true. Certainly, if you take the 2 most famous Grand Crus, they are wines of power, but not brutal. There's grace that goes with it as well. Regal, King of the Hill. They're gorgeous in that way. With that being said, they're not rustic. And that's the difference with some other vineyards that are also powerful. There's no rusticity in Chambertin and Clos de Bèze.
The fame of Gevrey-Chambertin is not without merit. Compared to its neighbors to the south, Gevrey is pretty huge. With 360 hectares of village, 86 hectares of Premier Cru, and 87 hectares of Grand Cru. Oftentimes, big, complex villages get lost in their own chaos. But Gevrey is just the opposite. There are 9 Grand Crus here, more than any other village in the Côte d'Or. Some of the very best Premier Crus, and impressively, some of the very best examples of village vineyards as well.
Okay, so Gevrey is super interesting, not just because of the quality of its vineyards, but also historically. So it's definitely linked to Roman times. The name Gevrey comes from Gibriacum, which was a Roman settlement. But also, about a decade ago, there's a vineyard that was found on the lower parts of Gevrey that dates back to the 1st century AD. And that pushes back by 200 years the first record of vineyards in the Côte d'Or. So that's super exciting for geeks. It doesn't have a name. It's an old Roman villa that was found. And next to it are the traces of the posts of old vineyards. Also, it has one of the earliest recorded donations of vineyards by a duke to the Abbey de Bèze in 640, and it's considered the first named vineyard in the Côte d'Or. the Clos de Bez, and probably the vastest amount of great talent in all of the Côte d'Or. I mean, Rousseau, Bachelet, Burguet, Fourrier, Dugas-Py, Trappé, Rossignol-Trappé, Durocher, Sylvie Monin, Arnaud Mortet, Joseph Roti, and I'm forgetting a ton, I'm sure, but also a ton of people that have vineyards in Gevrey that are not from Gevrey. It's riddled with exciting winemakers. Lastly, why it's exciting is, thanks to our history, it's always the village I take people to explain geology.
It should be noted that we could have easily built an entire episode on the people, history, and terroirs of Gevrey, and still just scratch the surface. But since we have more to see, we're going to start off with just the key points, the main factors that shape these terroirs. As we head out into these prized vineyards beneath what seems to be a continuous sheet of rain, I think, once again, just how intimidating this slope of vines can be. Throughout the years I've spent visiting Burgundy, I've done everything I can to experience as much as possible, and to taste as many wines as possible. And yet, I still feel like a complete imposter. Luckily, I don't think I'm alone in this feeling.
Initially, it was the most intimidating, It was like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, when I first started in the industry.
So, to help us wade through these murky waters and focus back in on what we love about this place, I've called upon probably the coolest person I know, Helen Johannesen.
My name's Helen Johannesen, and I am a partner in Helen's Wines and John & Vinny's in Los Angeles, California. I also have a podcast called Wine Face.
Helen loves wine, and she has this incredible ability to make wine accessible without dumbing it down or losing sight of the nuance that makes it more than just a beverage.
I tasted so many wines before I got to what I consider an awesome producer from Burgundy. And then when I first started at Animal, I remember I tasted, I think it was 2006 Fourrier Via Vigne, Gevrey Chambertin. And I was like, damn, what is that? That's Pinot Noir, but I've never tasted anything like that. That was the moment where I really had the aha that wine can be so complex and so simple, and that's what I loved about it. And I think Burgundy specifically is a great example of that. It's like a gateway into another world. It's also just could blow people's minds, and how many things can do that?
Conveniently, we're headed into the vineyards of Gevrey with Jean-Marie Fourrier himself.
The best weather today.
No, but you never forget the rainy days in vineyards.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Though Domaine Fourrier is small in size, farming about 10 hectares of vines, they're easily one of the most iconic domains within this illustrious village. As we drive into the vines, Jean-Marie points out some of the distinct zones throughout the village.
There is the south side of Gevrey,
Right.
with all the Grand Cru, between the Route des Grands Crus and the forest. There is this strip, which I would call the Champs-Élysées almost, looking at the value of the day of today. But the terroirs are amazing, but so variable from Ruchotte to La Trissière. Then the Premier Cru on the south side of Gevrey, which are on the low parts of Route des Grands Crus, trapped, which are quite fascinating. The Comte de Lavaux is definitely a split in terms of south and north of Gevrey, where it's exclusively Premier Cru and Village, but I think some of the most amazing and complex Premier Cru of Gevrey are really located that north side, because they do have also the benefit of the elevation.
Mm-hmm. Geologically, Gevrey is a terroir playground. It's a prime example of Côte d'Or geology and contains all of the main Côte de Nuits limestone players. Thanks to the maps of our dear Françoise Vanier, we can even begin to understand, in detail, how these different limestones and marls translate into the taste of the wines. In terms of terroir, Gevrey's got it all. There are distinct geologic zones that roughly correlate to historic vineyard designations. There are classic Côte de Nuits limestones that have been faulted along the slope, and a major comb formed by a major transverse fault that slices through the slope. This fault has shuffled up the geology on either side, while the comb in between has mixed things up and ejected a huge alluvial fan. There are vineyards we understand well, famous sites that remain a mystery, and of course, a little bit of a human fingerprint on the landscape too. Geologically, we can break down Gevrey Chambertin into at least 4 very clear zones. The large Côme Lavaux has deposited a huge alluvial fan. This alluvial material is what the village itself sits upon, as well as many of the village vineyards. Because this combe is so large, it has ejected lots of rounded limestone rocks, meaning many of Gevrey's village vineyards sit on deep, rocky, well-draining alluvial soils. The village vineyards here follow the alluvial fan and extend far out into the plain, causing many people to think there may be too much village in Gevrey. But the geology tells us that these are clearly high-quality growing sites.
They tend to produce darker wines that ripen earlier because the gravel doesn't retain water, and very round and very pretty fruit. So there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful Gevrey village on the alluvial fan.
The second zone, south of the Côme, is one of the most revered slopes in the Côte d'Or, the 9 continuous Grand Crus of Gevrey, the most famous by far being Chambertin and Clos de Bez. The geology here is dominated by crinoidal limestone, topped with Ostrea acuminata marl, some shaly limestone, and some hard Prémaux limestone at the top of the slope. The bottom of the slope is actually the younger, distinctive Comblanchian limestone that we've seen further south. The grandest of the Grand Crus are Chambertin and the Clos de Bez, the distinctive examples of that regal, graceful Gevrey power.
Rusticity kicks in a few other of the Grand Crus in Gevrey Chambertin. Massie is also very powerful, but there's a bit more grip, a little, more sense of gravel, more sense of wildness. Rouchot right above it is fascinating. It's probably the most mineral of all the Grand Crus. To the south of Chambertin is La Trissière, one of my favorite. Very elegant on the bottom because it slopes down, but also on the south. There's Grèze-Litay, and you know how much I love that. And then under the road, there's Mazoyer, Charme, Griotte, and Chapelle. Mazoyer can be called Charme. Often it is. Mazoyer is different. It's a little grittier. It's a little more gravelly. It comes across as a little more grippy. Griotte's an oddity. Is very small. It's an amphitheater. It's very fruit-driven, super pretty. Chapelle is the one that people are the least convinced about. I've always liked it. There's something blocky about it, but I find that really satisfying. But with that said, they're, phenomenal vineyards. There's no doubt about it.
Another dramatic fault cuts down the slope just along the northern edge of the Clos de Bez. This fault has downdropped a huge block of Prémaux limestone that extends all the way into the Côme Lavaux, a pretty extreme example of geologically distinct vineyard designations. The slope just north of the Côme Lavaux is home to what many consider the very best Premier Crus in the Côte d'Or. These vines are influenced climatically by the cool air that rushes out from the Côme, and by the many fault splays that ripple out from the main zone in the center of the Côme. The geology here contains the same classic limestone and marls found in the Grand Crus, just all jumbled up and rearranged.
So the north side of Gevrey, which is usually called La Côte Saint-Jacques, there's a number of really good vineyards, but the trio is Clos Saint-Jacques, Lavaux Saint-Jacques, and Cazetier. They're all contiguous. Clos Saint-Jacques is legendary. It is an incredibly mineral wine, red fruited. You really feel the cold air of the Côme. At Bruno Clair, we get to taste Clos de Bez, Cazetier, and Clos Saint-Jacques in direct comparison, and it's fascinating. Clos de Bez is always darker, always spicier, always grander, but Clos Saint-Jacques is more fit. It's ripped, it's athletic, it's an Olympian. It's all about stone. And I'm actually surprised, because of its minerality, which is really taught, that is that popular.
Finally, the northern edge of Gevrey is also pretty impressive. The geology here is a bit different. It's still dominated by the crinoidal limestone, but here it has a new partner, a sandy marl that we haven't seen before in the Côte d'Or. The top of the slope has a bit of the lovely Ostrea acuminata marl, the one packed with little oyster fossils that we've found in both Bonne-Mare and the Clos de Bez.
So north of Cazetier, you have Combeaumoine, Goulot, Champeau, Petit Castier. And it's a very sort of odd-looking slope in a way. It's really the epitome of Gevrey Chambertin. A certain amount of power.
And it's here, in this northern corner of Premier Crus, that we begin our tour with Jean-Marie.
So we are arriving in Combeau-Moine.
Oh, cool.
I have the vineyards above, on top, the first wall. Plus I have this one inside.
Oh, great.
This road climbing up here is the edge, is the limit. And after that, on the other combs becomes Goulot.
Okay.
And below this road, this is Champeau.
Oh, great.
This part of Gevrey feels like a different world from the rest of the Côte d'Or. There are ancient quarry walls and a few different levels of large terraces. You can't see it from the main road, so it kind of feels like a secret garden. Determined not to be deterred by the rain, we follow Jean-Marie into the vineyard.
So it has happened to me to do the tasting in springtime here, because this road is basically the crossroad of, as you were saying. Above this road it's Goulot, this is Combeau-Moine, and here is Champeau.
Ooh, this is definitely just raining. It feels very cold.
It is really cold. Well, it was supposed to be snow. And,
We look at the vertical cliff of crinoidal limestone surrounding Jean-Marie's parcel of Combe-au-Moine. If you look closely, you can see layers and layers of subtly changing environments, tidal deposits and channels, as the shoreline wandered 165 million years ago. Jean-Marie points out the vine roots that have made their way through meters and meters of fractures through this solid rock.
Well, it's definitely a great corner also for people to visit, to understand. When you come and see the cliff there, it just give an incentive to people to understand what the roots have to grow through to establish the system for the vines. A lot of people have this classic idea to think that vineyards need a deep and rich soil. It's never the case. And for me, that's what I always find fascinating, is to imagine what they are facing to just the roots. But it takes 7 to 8 years to develop the trunk. It takes more than 30 years to develop the roots. And I always look vineyards as a mother. And as long as she didn't need to establish a root system, she cannot feed her kids the grapes.
In this special plot, Jean-Marie has added a small stone picnic table and a somewhat Sith-like stone statue of a monk.
Well, if you ever feel one day, maybe not today, we have a nice picnic corner.
Fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
And that's for anyone to use?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's the idea. I don't want to do a publicity or thing.
Yeah.
It's just, when people come and visit Burgundy, I think they all go to restaurants or go taste in the cellars, but just buy an assortment of cheese. You just stop at the traffic light at the corner of the winery, get a baguette, you come up here, nice bottle of wine. And I mean, the incentive you can get from the area is just so much deeper and nicer. But the view, that when the monks used to come, 11th century, you get there, we are cut it from the wind of the north. It's a stunning vineyard.
We look to the wall of limestone.
The stone of Gevrey, the reason why they did was quarry, they used to extract rocks, and some monuments, even some monuments in Paris have been made with it.
Yeah.
But a lot of graves also of vignerons have been made with the stone of Gevrey, which is, it's that pink, it's classic pink color.
This looks like a little vein. See?
Yeah.
That's cool. Maybe. I'm sorry to do this. Yeah. See how this is polished? And you see the lines on it? If you look really close, you kind of have to feel, like right here.
Yeah.
It's a fault plane.
Ah,
But
okay.
You can see we say it's unnaturally smooth.
Okay.
But it is natural, probably. And then you get the veins that kind of grow on that surface, but you can see, if you feel it, you can feel like little ridges.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, here's a good spot for it, and like right here, where the rock moved.
Yeah, let's walk to Les Goulots.
Yeah.
And you see that, as you were saying, Les Goulots, the water is running through the vines.
Yeah.
But this road is catching the water, but never go into Champeau
Really?
under. I mean, apply that on sand trees. It has never really washed out the soil of Champeau, and hence why the gap of difference, also in terms of personality in the style, and hence why goulot, in French it's goulotte.
Okay.
Goulotte, the gullies.
Gutters.
The gutters, exactly.
Oh,
Gully or gutter, I think. Yeah.
gully. Oh.
But you imagine if all this rain would have keep going down, the erosion it would have generated. So this is very steep. Do you see where are those young trees, those acacias trees? Okay, there's like a wall. So all of these, my grandma used to tell me, she worked there as a tâcheron. It was planted as Chardonnay in 45.
Oh.
It's never been replanted. They let trees going up there. And then after that I have a second plot of land just there. And when you're up here, people, when they see Burgundy, rarely see Gevrey, Chambertin, how close we are from Dijon, just there.
Yeah, wow.
So this is Les Goulots, which here when we plow, we are almost on the rocks. Even plowing is really difficult because it's been so eroded. But you see in terms of elevation, where we are, Goulot here, on the other side of the combe you have Ruchotte.
Yeah.
So
And it's
Goulot is even higher in terms of elevation.
Yeah.
So hence why this mineral character. But to me this is an amazing corner by its elevation, its exposure, the way it's exposed to the wind north, from the north, with also the wind of the Combe de Lavaux. It's always colder also in the area. And yeah, of course you can imagine when the sun goes down, those vineyards are
In the shade. Yeah.
in the shade, probably 4:30 max, you're already in the shade.
Wow. In the summer.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's quite early. That's why the mix between the soils, the exposure of the terroir. For me, I have been lucky enough to discover having this legacy from being so close from each other.
Right.
It's not that easy. I don't think I would have seen the things the same way if I wouldn't have had the chance to have three vineyards so close from each other.
Right. Exactly.
It was just being lucky.
Wow.
Whoa.
So good. Sorry.
Lots of tiny layers.
Yeah. And it's in the rain, it's just like disintegrating.
Right. Right?
Oh yeah.
Your world. That's fascinating. Huh? It's true that our parents and grandparents didn't really realize or couldn't put words under what was our feet. But it's just magical the way they discover it.
Yeah. But they still knew.
I mean, science is fantastic to understand things. You know, as a friend said to me one day, you look at in a dictionary the definition of biology and the definition of œnology. One says science of life, the other one says science of wine. I think it's more fascinating to know in life about life in general than just wine. So yeah, I often resume it that the more I am a biologist and the less I need to be an enologist.
Yeah. We're right on time.
Perfect. Good timing.
Et là, tu prends à droite, là.
On another, less rainy day, we continue down the northern slope of Premier Crus along what many call the Côte Saint-Jacques.
Et puis là, tu peux te mettre là, tu te sors à gauche, et puis Michel se met à droite.
Our guide is Eduard Clair, son of the charismatic Bruno Clair of Domaine Bruno Clair.
Bonjour.
Bruno is straight out of a 19th century novel. He's got a baritone voice. He's incredibly interested in history and politics. If you ask him any historical question, it will be an hour before you taste any wine. He's hilarious. He's out of a Émile Zola novel. It's a really great family. Now the domain is run by the two sons, who are wonderful, are making a lot of changes. I think it's possible that Eduard descends directly from Bruno. He's a toughie, plays rugby, gets bloodied up. I once saw him with stitches all over his face. Both of them do a lot together, but Eduard is mostly in the vineyards where he's doing incredible stuff. And Archer is more in the cellar.
All on the right, it's Emona. This is our part. Jadot, Fourrier, and Rousseau. Rousseau, it's on the south.
The extraordinary thing about Clos Saint-Jacques is that when it was sold in 1955, some people say 1954, it was a monopoly. And all the owners got rows that went from the bottom to the top. Today there are 5 owners, and it's incredibly consistent in its quality because everybody has a perfect slice of the terroir.
This unique division makes the Clos Saint-Jacques one of the most interesting exercises in understanding the differences between style and terroir. Each producer has rows spanning the same layer cake of Jurassic limestone as their neighbors. Just next to Clos Saint-Jacques is Cazetier. This vineyard is a bit lesser known, but beloved by many deeply entrenched Burgundy lovers. It's spelled like Cazetier, but the French tend to squish it all together and say Cazetier.
You have the Castier on the right of the wall. Castier, we can see it's not the same soil because you have maybe 2 meters between the two on the top. It's you have a step, a big step.
Yeah. Can we do a quick little walk up?
Yeah, we can walk a little up. Yeah.
Here we find several pieces of angular silex, which Françoise believes is derived from further up the Combe Lavaux.
See it won't scratch.
Okay. If you can write it.
Yeah, right. So
Pour le coup.
it's probably limestone.
Okay.
See, scratches it. This.
It's black.
This scratches onto that.
Okay.
So this is softer than this.
It's hard.
Yeah. So it's not. Well,
Yeah,
this is silex, this is.
Yes, limestone.
The infamous Gevrey silex.
At the top of the slope, we walk over to the top of Cazetier. Although just a few steps away, the rocks here have been more rearranged than in Clos Saint-Jacques, and so has the ownership.
Cazetier is always darker, always spicier, nowhere near the same minerality as Clos Saint-Jacques. A beautiful wine, but almost like a winter contemplative wine. It's enjoyable. Earlier, it ages super well. In fact, the Clairs believe it ages longer than their Clos Saint-Jacques. Then south of Clos Saint-Jacques is Lavaux Saint-Jacques, which is one of my favorite Premier Crus in all of Burgundy. And that, you're getting close really to the mouth of the Combe. You're getting super cool. And to me, that gives it an alpine feel. It's super delicate. It's all about fragrance. It's all about blue fruit as opposed to the black fruit of Clos de Bèze or Castier or the red fruit of Clos Saint-Jacques. It's ethereal almost.
C'est Marne Blanche
Right.
qui ferait du bon blanc.
We head across the valley to the slope of Grand Crus for one last stop in the historic Côte de Nuits.
The soil's different here compared to Dijon.
Aye. And this is the oldest,
Yes.
1912.
You have similar soil really at the top of Côte de Nuits with the more wider soils.
Here in the Côte de Nuits, the slope is a perfect slice of Jurassic limestone layer cake. Hard Premo limestone at the top, then Shaly limestone, Ostrea acuminata marl, and crinoidal limestone. This sequence is continuous and unbroken by any major faults.
Il y a sûrement beaucoup plus d'argile.
Yeah, wait. More clay.
Standing in a vineyard with such history and presence, it's hard to know where to begin.
We've talked about before, so many people don't have a lot of experiences with Grand Crus. You know, what should other young people know about the Grand Crus? Like, what should people know about this vineyard?
Grand cru parce que le mot vient de bien, enfin, de qui crue bien, donc qui croît bien,
Qui croit bien.
qui pousse bien. Moins de maladies dans un grand cru.
It
Less
comes-
disease.
Yeah, it comes from the word to grow, cru, croître. And so it's a vineyard that grows well with less disease.
Less disease, a good drainage, and not too much clay, but enough clay. For the area, it's usually less frost.
Mhm.
It's warmer here.
Then the
Less
Côte-
disease.
Then the Côte Saint-Jacques.
Yes,
Yes.
it's maybe a good wind too.
Mhm.
Yes, you have the big difference of the Grand Cru and the other is not easy vintage. A warm vintage, an easy vintage, very ripe, like 18, 19, 20, 22. The difference between the Grand Cru and the other is less.
Okay.
Yes. The Grand Cru, you have a big difference for the small year because it's ripest.
When you get to them, you know, there's this silence that sets in because they're just so convincing. There's that extra little length. There's that extra will, like in, you know, may the force be with you kind of way. It's just like this, okay, you've convinced me, I'm done. This is why we're here in this cellar.
For me, Grand Cru is a designation that, like, I would say 90% of the time, I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. This is baller. This is above. This is taking it to the next level. This wine is on a plane of its own. It has jazz hands. It's fucking epic.
Which is your favorite wine in the lineup of all your appellations?
It depends the year, but often the Clos Saint-Jacques. Often Castier Clos Saint-Jacques for me. Sometimes it's, you don't know why, it's the Minode. Some years, if it's very young, it could be Charmot-Prêtre or Longeroy, or I don't know.
Chambol-Verroy.
Chambol. For the Vaudenel and Von Romanet, for me, the warm vintage is very good for wine.
Like when you really want to be special.
Yes. Castier Clos Saint-Jacques Claude Bèze. If we test old wine, you have the Longeroy, you can keep a long time. For me, the quality price,
It's incredible.
it's Grasse-Tête, Longeroy, maybe some village, but I don't know, the 5 or 6 times expensive for a wine, 6 times pleasure. I can't measure my pleasure. I don't know if it's 5 times more, but yes, for Marsannay for me, Grasse-Tête, Longeroy, and now Charmot-Prêtre, and sometimes Vaudenel is perfect.
With exactly this sentiment in mind, we leave the grandeur of Gevrey Chambertin and arrive in the quiet village of Fixin. Fixin is a little village sandwiched in between two giants. Gevrey to the south, where we've just been, and Marsannay to the north, which spans 3 villages and nearly 470 hectares of vines. Fixin is not a famous appellation. The village is small, with only 103 hectares of village and 22 hectares of Premier Cru. the wines tend to be overlooked and are usually described as rustic, and not necessarily in a good way. But this hasn't always been the case.
There's 5 Premier Crus. 3 of them are monopoles, which is important, even though one of them is partially sold to Méo Camouset. So there's only 2 Premier Crus that you see with all the other producers of Fixin, which is Hervelay and Arvelay, which is basically the same vineyard cut in half with a different spelling. In the 19th century, several vineyards of Fixin were thought to be on the par with the best of Gevrey. Laval, who was, the first unofficial classification of Burgundy in 1855, he compared Arvelay to Clos Saint-Jacques. There was one grower who owned both Fixin and Gevrey, and he sold his Arvelay at the same price as his Chambertin, I believe. So there was a great fame to the wines. And then when the appellations happened, all of Fixin was allowed to be sold as Côte de Nuits village. And the lack of a ton of Premier Crus, the lack of flagship domains in the 60s, 70s, is what, I guess, contributed to some of the rusticity that we saw in Fixin. Because when you're selling your wines as Côte de Nuits village, there's no incentive to really manage the vineyards for quality production. But there's no doubt that the village can produce extraordinary wines, as is demonstrated by Amélie, with several of her vineyards, and in particular with Fixin Arvelay, which is on the level of a great Gevrey Premier Cru, without a doubt.
In my mind, and the minds of many others, there is one producer to know in Fixin, Amélie Berthaut of Domaine Berthaut Gerbet.
Yeah, she's a badass. She drives around in that little cute truck. I mean, talk about strength. Like that kind of perseverance to then be making the wine she's making, and for it to have the recognition it's having under her name and the domain's name is awesome. The most exciting ones are the Fixin, I think, because they really are her.
Amélie and her husband, Nicolas Faure, I think they're like the most ethical people I know. There's a great write-up about her on her website, which starts with a quote, an old quote that's carved in stone in one of the Berthaut buildings that basically says, better do well than talk. And that really sums up Amélie, I'm sure her family, and also Nico, her husband. They're not talkers, they're doers, and it's slow, and it's profound, and it's work. And so it's a lot about serious work, quiet work, and great talent.
We meet Amélie at the domaine and walk out to the vines.
Your father and your mother, there's 2 domains.
Yes.
Separate.
Yes.
One in Vaughan, one in Fixin.
Yes.
And they ran them completely separately.
Yes. Like different vineyard culture, completely different vinification, different markets, everything different. It came from their parents, because my father always worked with his father and his brother, my uncle, and my mother always with her family, so my grandfather and my aunt. And Fixin and Vaughan, it used to be very different villages, because Vaughan has always been very famous with all the big names, all the Grand Cru, and Fixin was more, how do you say, more paysan?
Peasants.
Yeah. So Vaughan Ramené, rich. And Fixin, yeah, more agriculture, I think. That's my point of view. But they met at school, at the enology thing in Dijon. But yeah, very different vision of the viticulture, which is great because I can take from both. Maybe viticulture more from my father.
Her husband, Nicolas Faure, is another one of our favorite people in the Côte d'Or, and the two make an impressive yet solidly independent team. Today, Nico directs the farming at Berthaut Gerbet, while also farming and vinifying his own tiny but very impressive and adored domaine.
But now run 2 domains, you and Nicolas,
Yes.
separately. But as far
Yes,
as
it is separately. Well, Nicolas works
you're his
with
boss,
us.
there's that. But vinification-wise, it's separate, even though you get along and talk a lot.
Yeah.
It's very different as well.
Yes. Yes, it's the same.
Involuntary repetition of history.
But my parents, they exchange a lot, talk a lot, but keep their way. And we want to do the same, I think. It's important to have our own stuff. But for some stuff, they did together, and it's exactly the same as Nicolas and me, the 2 domains. And now Nicolas is doing our domain and his domain.
When we met Amélie because of Nicolas,
Oh, really?
I called Nicolas to meet him at a certain time. We just started working with him.
You met him because of Aurélien.
Aurélien Gerbet. He popped a bottle, 12 vintage. He didn't have any wine. Anyway, so we started with him, I think, in 13. And at one point I was trying to make an appointment with him. I said, no, I can't. At 4:30, I'm going to be in Fixin. And I'm like, yeah, why? He said, oh, I have to go see my girlfriend in Fixin. I was like, okay. Does she make wine? He says, yes. I said, is it any good? And he said, yeah, honestly, it's not because it's my girlfriend. The wine's really good. So I put the phone down. I go online. And I see all the vineyards, and yes, there's Lavaux, there's Castier, there's already Von Petitmont, I think, in the first. But I see this massive amount of Fixin, and that's what excited me, because it's relatively easy to find great Gevrey or great Von. But there was no great Fixin in my mind. I mean, I'm not going to turn down the Lavaux and the Castier and the things like that. All these lieux-dits she was making, plus Arvelay, which is just like the most exciting thing, because it's like archaeology. It's like finding, ruins.
And so what did you know about Fixin before Amélie?
You didn't work with any Fixin?
No, we'd seen the beginnings of interest with négociants like Dominique Laurent, who liked Fixin and produced Fixin.
But Fixin is very small, it's only 100 hectares.
Yeah, it's one of the.
So you cannot be on all the markets too. And lots of the domain, they sell grapes, they sell wine, do you say bulk wine?
Bulk wine,
Yeah.
or grapes.
So it's more difficult than like Marsannay, because there are many domains, and they can be everywhere.
Yeah, so Marsannay, there have been really good domains in Marsannay for some time.
Yeah.
But Fixin was, like, we read about it.
No, but we are not famous, but I think we are a good group. Like the domains, it's changing a lot.
Yeah.
With the young generation.
And so it's rediscovering something, really.
Should we go?
Yeah.
Sure.
We arrive in what most believe to be the best section of the Fixin vineyards, just along the base of the Premier Crus, Hervelay, and Arvelay. The geology here is a little bit reminiscent of a mini Gevrey, with Ostrea acuminata marl, crinoidal limestone, and the sandy marl we saw with Jean-Marie, plus alluvial fans extending from the slopes into the plain.
So this is the Hervelay. Because just there you have the limit between Arvelay North and Hervelay. And this is our small vineyard. So the bottom part is very young, planted in 16. And the top part, more like 50 years old.
And it stops here.
Yes, we put rosier. Nico planted it.
Speaking of which, does it really have a use, pour les maladies, for the diseases, or not?
People say that you have the odium before and
On the
this.
roses.
Not sure. Could be an explanation. But for us it's just more that you have only vineyards and we want to see
By it, yeah.
biodiversity. So we like to put this. We planted a tree just there. It's the tree for our baby Leo.
Aww.
We planted it last year. It's an amandier. I don't know the name in English.
Almond tree.
Almond tree. So we hope one day it will be huge.
So Amélie produces actually both Arvelais and Hervelais. So let's talk about Arvelais, where the bulk of the vineyards is. You know, Laval compared it to Clos Saint-Jacques. I think what they do share is this sort of minerality, this kind of, you know, I'm a runner instead of a couch potato kind of wine. You know, it's going to be about minerality. It's not grippy. It's not rustic. There's no rusticity in it. And then this is very red soil on the bottom. So you definitely have that iron oxide kind of umami that comes with it. Do you or Nicolas notice any difference in terroir between Hervelais and Arvelais?
But what we see is the difference of the soils and more on the top part, because it's really a sandy soil. It's almost orange sometimes of the year.
In Hervelais?
In Hervelais,
Top of
yeah.
Hervelais.
The top of Hervelais, yeah. It's really more, sand and orange.
So
this is more like
brown,
red,
red-brown,
yeah.
and no sand, doesn't...
Less sand,
Less sand.
much less. And both are very shallow soils. Or maybe this is the worst part.
The most shallow?
Yeah. This and the bottom of Arvelais,
Okay.
because you have two parts.
The rest of Amélie's Fixin vineyards are Village Ludis.
There's a fair amount of sand in Fixin, and sand is the opposite of rusticity. So if you take, for example, her Fixin Les Crêts, it's very Gevrey-like in the sense that it's fairly broad, but it's also got a stunning velvety texture. Les Clos is an oddball, and I don't know if it's representative of Fixin. It's so graceful and elegant. I don't know if there's something going on with geology or the genetic material or something. And then lastly, La Encomberois, which is a little enclave in the vineyard of Entre-deux-Velles, right below Arvelais, on a little mound. That one gives you a lot of grip, profound, a little reserved.
And so we get to Comberois. You've been here before.
Yes, she has many times. The mysterious Encomberois.
So yes, I think there is something special with this vineyard because it's on the on top. So
The dome, yeah.
but also it's not all about the soil, but also the plants are really good plants, very old.
So it's not necessarily that the terroir is rustic. Some of them are, but it's not necessarily that the terroir is rustic. It's that there's a whole other set of economic circumstances.
Yeah, it's more the people.
It's the people and what happened to the price and things like that. But as we see with Amélie now that, you know, you've got a few vintages and the work is starting to pay off, we see, you know, you take Arvelais, for example, it's one of my favorite wines in the cellar, even though she has Castier and Labo Saint-Jacques and Suchot and Petit-Mont, and Arvelais remains extraordinary.
I think so.
No, but it's...
I think Arvelais is a better terroir than a lot of different good villages from what we have. But for me, it's better terroir than our Vaune.
Okay. Parentheses. This is normally classified as Premier Cru.
Yeah.
But
Meba.
Les Mébas. But this the reality of some of the less famous villages. The land was more valuable as building land, which is tragic. But so there's no Premier Cru here. Si, ça c'est Mébas.
Yes. And it's not finished because they keep building. Like you see the big house. So just after there is a very new one, like a architect. So it's in our clos, which is called Clos de Fixin. So we used to have the vineyard way before the house. They built a house 2-3 years ago.
Really?
And now they kind of want us to take off some plants because they put their swimming pool. Well, it's a problem in our villages because all the vineyards are coming really close to the houses. Mm-hmm. But it's more than the houses came close to the vineyards. Mm-hmm. Because before it was only vineyards. Mm-hmm. Like they don't have this problem in Vaud-Romany.
We leave the little village of Fixin and head north to Marsannay. Marsannay is another underdog in the Côte d'Or, but one that has seen a recent surge in popularity, particularly as Burgundy lovers search out off-the-radar regions where they can still uncover some high-caliber bottles for a more affordable price. There's a lot going on here. It's a big appellation with its own complicated history. Great wines from Marsannay can be red, white, or rosé. And in fact, only here there is a special appellation dedicated specifically to rosé. A great Marsannay rosé is more than just a pink wine. As we mentioned before, Marsannay is a huge appellation that technically comprises 3 separate villages: Couchet, Marsannay-la-Côte, and Chenauve. There are 369 hectares of Village Marsannay and another 100 hectares designated specifically to Marsannay rosé. As of today, there are no Premier Crus in Marsannay, though an extensive application was submitted to the INAO over 10 years ago. This is typical French bureaucracy, I'm told, and there's little concern that the vineyards won't be awarded their Premier Cru status. Someday.
So to me, it could be the start of a bigger movement, these less expensive, lesser known, and historically thought of as lesser quality sites potentially needed just a different thought process in winemaking to elevate them to greatness. That wave, for me, I think it was probably like first tasting Sylvain Pataille, right? Probably the most famous wave maker in Marsannay. And even before him, tasting like Bruno Clair's wines. I love wines from there now, in general. But I think it also has so much to do with the people who are making it.
Marsannay has been lagging behind the glory of the rest of the Côte d'Or for a long time. In fact, they only received their village status in 1987. But that hasn't always been the case either. In order to learn more about how Marsannay got to where it is today, we return to the cellar of Domaine Bruno Clair, so Bruno himself can set the record straight.
Love Bruno Clair. I feel like, LL Bean. No, I'm just kidding. It's like wearing a plaid jacket. These wines, I feel like it really feels like a family business in a lot of ways. Feels very historical, feels like very passion-driven, very patriarchal, which for me is not always a turn on. It's oftentimes a turn off. But because of how Bruno, when I met him, read, I received it really well because he brought this level of humility to what he was doing. I still also think people don't equate enough value to them.
Do you want me to translate at all? Bruno's not going to speak English.
Yes.
Ça n'a pas changé. Je n'ai pas progressé depuis la dernière fois.
Maybe his lessons didn't pan out since you were here.
Mine either.
J'ai lu aussi.
We're visiting with Bruno and his other son Arthur, who takes care of the cellar.
Alors l'histoire, ouais, c'est clair. Il faut revenir à Philippe le Hardy, le duc de Bourgogne, qui avait passé un décret en disant qu'on devait planter exclusivement du chardonnay et du pinot noir sur la côte.
You have to go back to the history of Burgundy with Philip the Bold. What year?
C'était en 1400, je sais plus, 1430 et quelques, sous le règne de Philippe le Hardy.
Okay, so in the 1400s, who did a decree that said you should only plant Chardonnay and Pinot Noir?
Auparavant, c'est les moines, donc cisterciens, qui venaient de Cluny, qui ont imposé le Pinot Noir, considérant que c'était le seul cépage digne de faire des grands vins de qualité. Voilà.
Bruno explains that even before Philip the Bold, the Cistercian monks had declared Pinot Noir and Chardonnay to be the highest quality grapes for this area.
Mais par facilité, les vignerons étaient toujours tentés de planter plutôt du gamay, parce qu'il faut savoir que le gamay, lui, lorsqu'il y a une gelée par exemple, assure au moins une demi-récolte avec les faux bourgeons, moins sensible aux maladies qui existaient déjà, qui étaient l'odium, qui était le mildiou, maladie qu'on connaît toujours ici.
But the winemakers would plant a lot of gamay for practical purposes. First of all, when there's frost, it still produces a half crop because of the secondary buds. And it's also more resistant to diseases that already existed back then, not the same, but certainly some.
Voilà, donc tout le monde a obéi au décret de Philippe le Hardy, parce qu'il faut savoir que c'était conditionné. Si jamais on prenait quelqu'un à planter autre chose que Pinot Noir, c'était la prison et une très forte amende. Donc c'était pas, c'était pas de la blague là.
Also, it wasn't just, a toothless decree. If anybody was caught planting gamay, they actually went to jail.
C'est une parenthèse tout ça. On s'est un peu éloigné de Marsannay. Mais, donc à Marsannay, ce qui va se passer, c'est qu'à la Révolution française, évidemment, là il va y avoir ce qu'on appelle les ventes en biens nationaux. C'est-à-dire que à la veille de la Révolution française, les 3/4 des vignes appartiennent soit à des grandes familles aristocrates, mais surtout au clergé.
Skip to the French Revolution. So at the eve of the French Revolution, 75% of the vineyards were in the hands of either the aristocracy or the church. And of course, the vineyards were confiscated and auctioned off.
Voilà, donc ce qui va se passer, à la Révolution française, tous les décrets, les lois sont remises en cause et les gens s'affranchissent de...
After the French Revolution, lots of laws disappeared, including the ban on gamay. Dijon's population boomed during the Industrial Revolution, and the surrounding villages were thirsty for delicious, drinkable, inexpensive bistro wines, primarily gamay.
So, effectively, the vignerons here, Marsannay, Chenauve, Couchet, got way richer than people in Vaune because they had this huge market for bistro wines. There's a really telling sign. If you look at the town halls, they're too big for the town. They're like almost pretentious. But,
Arrive le phylloxéra, donc qui va détruire tout le vignoble européen. Donc ça va venir entre 1872 et 1880. Ici en Bourgogne, je crois que c'est 75-78. Donc à partir de 1885, toutes les vignes sont arrachées. Il faut replanter avec des plants greffés.
Yeah. So phylloxera, Burgundy 1875, 1878. But basically, all the vineyards had to be replanted, and the vignerons of Marsannay, Couchet, and Chenauve believe that this demand for gamay, cheaper wines, is going to continue, so they replant everything to gamay and aligoté. So one of the big things that happened in France that changed a lot of things is the arrival of the train. They could bring up wines from the Languedoc that were prices that you couldn't even compete with, and it destroyed that bistro wine market for a lot of regions actually. That was catastrophic.
Donc arrive la guerre de 14, et la guerre de 14, ici pour des villages comme Marsannay, qui sont devenus, qui étaient riches avant le phylloxéra, mais qui deviennent des villages à problème économique, la guerre de 14 va achever tout ça, parce que qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? La guerre de 14, c'est tous les hommes de 17 ans à 45 ans sont tous partis à la guerre. Il n'y en a pas un qui n'est pas allé. Même les intellectuels, tous les écrivains, tout le monde y était. Qu'est-ce qui se passe dans un village comme Marsannay?
So the nail in the coffin was World War I, because every man aged between 16, 17, and 45 went to the war. And so during that time, it was difficult to take care of the vineyards. And you actually never hear about the vintages 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. You hear about 19, which was great. But basically that really sped up the decline.
Dans les villages où il y a quand même un négoce assez puissant, sur Beaune...
Bruno's grandfather, Joseph, was from Fontenay. After being injured in World War I, he fell in love with a nurse named Marguerite Daou of Marsannay. He swore that if he survived the war, he would return and marry her. And soon after the war ended, he did just that. Together, they find vines in Marsannay and create the historic domaine Clair Daou.
So he comes back to Marsannay, he finds vineyards that are, almost in an abandoned state, Pinots that have survived, and he says, well, what can we do? And then he said, maybe we can do something interesting to separate ourselves out from the competition. Let's make a rosé. And the sommelier at the best restaurant of the time, which was called the Trois Faisans, now the Pré au Clair, loved it. And that was the birth of Marsannay Rosé in the 1919 vintage, and that was a resounding success for Marsannay, actually.
Okay. Bon, donc le rosé de Marsannay, ça va permettre au village de survivre pendant la crise, parce qu'arrive une nouvelle crise. Vous voyez que la viticulture, franchement, n'est pas gâtée. À partir de la crise phylloxérique, c'est une succession de problèmes. La guerre de 14, le problème, et la crise économique de 1929.
Les autres maladies qui sont arrivées.
Maladies qui arrivent également. Donc c'est vraiment c'est pas l'âge d'or. Hein. Et donc en cette crise des années 30, le rosé.
And just to point out that after phylloxera, that whole era was pretty dreadful and difficult economically. But the success of the Marsannay Rosé, first of all, is going to make a lot of people replant Pinot instead of Gamay. And for some reason, that survived economically throughout. So even though half the vignerons disappeared from Marsannay, this other half had an outlet, an economic outlet.
On revient à Marsannay. Donc,
Marsannay.
Donc, puisqu'on est en 1935, le problème pour Marsannay, Chenauve-Couché, et non pas Fissin, mais les 3 premiers villages, ils sont toujours encépagés pour encore une bonne partie en Gamay. On a oublié, enfin, on est resté sur ce 19e siècle, donc il y a une image qui fait que Marsannay ne peut en aucun cas revendiquer l'appellation village. Donc on lui donne l'appellation générique Bourgogne. Il faudra alors ensuite, ça va replanter, après la Seconde Guerre, dans les années 50, ça replante pas mal. Cette fois-ci, on peut dire que le finage est couvert en pinot noir. Et en 1965, on obtient une appellation intermédiaire qui est Bourgogne-Marsannay. Et il faudra, en 65, ouais. Et il faudra attendre 1987 pour enfin avoir l'appellation Marsannay Village, qu'on n'aurait jamais dû quitter, en fait. Mais à cause de cette parenthèse immense du 19e siècle, là, on l'a payé très cher. C'est-à-dire que 3 générations se sont bien goinfrées pour en emmerder 3 autres.
Yeah, so in 35, when they started the appellations, Marsannay, Couché, Chenauve were still planted to a lot of Gamay. And there was no way they would get even the village appellation because of that. So they became Bourgogne. And so basically one generation during the 19th century or a couple generations during the 19th century filled their pockets, but they had to pay for it for 3/4 of a century.
Et voilà, et on attend depuis 20 ans les premiers crus, et j'en ai fini avec l'histoire de Marsannay.
So now they've been waiting for the premier crus for 20 years. Hey, where are we? Where are we?
We continue into a deeper part of the cellar, where our tour walks us through the great wines of Marsannay.
This is the Marsannay Vaudenel.
Vaudenel.
Which you know well, it rhymes too. The 3 Marssannays are really site-specific in big concepts.
We will compare them now.
Yeah.
In 20.
It's a little New Worldy ripe, but there's so much acidity behind it that,
Gras tête.
Just a really cool, kind of savory texture.
a premium texture to the wine.
Which one is yours?
Donc Gras tête.
And Langerois.
So, skinnier, right, than the previous wine, but more defined than the first one. To me, the difference is so clear.
So Langerois is the biggest appellation in Marsannay. So every producer has some Langerois in Marsannay. Every plat is different, but there is an harmony between all this Langerois. There's some difference, but not too big.
Oh, here's classic mid-slope,
La dernière carte de
anchored, but
Françoise.
not too much.
The Last de Françoise. Marsannay, the first, Montresamy. Ça se complexe.
Okay, Gevrey.
There is not a real poster for Marsannay compared to Gevrey, which have general characteristic. Marsannay is very different. Arrête-moi si je me trompe, mais pour moi Marsannay, on peut pas définir Marsannay comme des styles de vin comme ça. Il y a trop de différences comme Savigny peut l'être par exemple. I think to me Savigny and Marsannay is very close in terms of characteristic because there are so many different terroirs, so many different soil.
Mais c'est pour tous les villages, c'est vrai ce que tu dis, dans le sens où par confort intellectuel, on a envie d'enfermer.
After thanking the 3 Clair gentlemen, we head out to visit the vines of Marsannay with one of the village's most beloved inhabitants, Sylvain Pataille.
He's just a very generous soul who has his real own view of the world, maybe the antithesis of anti-terroirists, like he's diehard. It's amazing. Like he's indefatigable, you know, like he can go so long and like is like, but try this one and try this one and try this one. I think he's really important though, I think, in the story of Burgundy and the accessibility of Burgundy, because I have so many customers who Sylvain Pataille was a gateway for them and provided that access that was needed. So for that, you know, that's a revolutionary kind of person. And then they don't even know like how obsessed he is with the 20 different plots of Aligoté he has or whatever.
It's nearly impossible to describe a visit with Sylvain. I think every time I've been there, we've had to wait outside his cellar for an impressive amount of time. Just long enough to wonder if it could possibly be worth it.
And there he is.
And then Sylvain appears out of nowhere, busy and beaming with a head of golden curls and big, thick glasses. With his naughty pup, Scooby-Doo, prancing at his heels, and you're swept away into a new, odd, and fascinating universe.
Sylvain was trained to be an enologist, and in fact, after his national enology diploma, worked for one of the main enologists in Burgundy, and actually consulted for a bunch of famous domains. There were no vineyards in the family. There were a tiny bit of vineyards in the family, so he wasn't certain in the beginning that he was going to make his own wine, but eventually he did. And Sylvain is very loved. He's funny, very well spoken, very insightful, and will always throw you things you've never thought about before.
No, Kubi, viens là.
He was the first of those people, I think, in Burgundy to ride that line between classic and natural. But he's gone really far. I mean, the whites in particular, you may have some oxidative wines. He doesn't care. There's a little sulfur in them. And they come and go. It goes into oxidative phase. It comes back. It can do that even in your glass. So he's not afraid to let go. Well, his character, it's hard to encapsulate in words. I mean, he's a ray of sunshine very often, but he's just so adorable and intelligent and bright, and it doesn't fit a soundbite. That's the problem. Il était là il y a 2 secondes. Okay.
Allez, Scooby-Doo! Allez,
It is cold. Yes.
C'est bon?
We're alive.
Could we turn the heat on a little bit?
Marsannay is filled with hidden treasures that have been overlooked. Amongst the Pinot and Chardonnay, there are also old vines of Aligoté. And not just old vines, but old vines planted on the slope.
For Aligoté, it depends who's growing it. You get someone like Sylvain Pataille growing Aligoté, it can absolutely crush, or Nicolet crushes it with the Aligoté. Flavor-wise, it's not my favorite. I think it benefits from good terroir. And I think, again, Pataille, like, very elegantly outlines how different terroir can influence Aligoté in these, like, really beautiful and nuanced ways. But when it hits, it can hit hard. But I would say generally it doesn't hit that hard. Like, especially when you taste one, you're like, this just kind of feels like filler. But not all Aligoté is created equal, for show. If you want to try Aligoté, try it from a great maker. And usually they're harder to find. There's not that much. But, like, you scoop it up, give it a whirl. It can be very magical.
Aligoté is basically the other white Burgundy. It's a hardy, high-acid, vigorous variety that is almost always found on the lower slope in heavy clay. Because of this, it's often thought of as a fleshy and simple grape. But here, old vines and great terroirs showcase what Aligoté can really do.
Well, Aligoté was considered one of the lesser grapes in Burgundy when the appellations got created, and so it got kicked out of Premier Cru, Village, or Grand Cru appellations. And now that we have a bunch of single vineyard Aligotés to taste through, it undeniably translates terroir brilliantly in a very different way than Chardonnay. Chardonnay produces, that luxury texture, the deep seat with the cushions, and Aligoté produces energy. It's very electric, very exciting and thrilling. You get the sense of You're living the high life with Chardonnay. You're living the dangerous life with Aligoté. You know. Hey, wake up! You know.
So this vineyard, you have a
Don't
vineyard
get too
in
ready.
Fixin?
No. Just the storage.
You're all in Marsannay.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But you still buy the Bouzeron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some Aligoté in Chevron, in Haute Côte.
But the vineyards you farm are.
Yeah. I farm 18 hectares in Marsannay. I buy 1 hectare to my father. And I buy 5 hectares in Marsannay to friends who are or organic or who leave me spray.
Okay.
I spray 5 hectares more than my vines. There are villages and all over there. It was some great terroirs that have been built in the 50s. As many towns, the town has been stronger than the vines.
Yeah, building land was more valuable than vineyards in Marsannay.
Clos du Roi.
So, Clos du Roi.
Ouais. T'as raison, Scooby, te laisse pas faire. They are so incredible. The terroirs are incredible. It's great here. The soil in French is graisse litée. Very small wells that have been produced by the forest and defrost. Voilà, Clos du Roi.
And you have Pinot, Chardonnay, and Aligoté.
Yeah. This is one of mine. You want to go and see the vines or? And Scooby-Doo too wants to go.
Yes, he doesn't like the car very much.
So this vineyard originally had Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Aligoté?
Yeah.
Or you planted?
They were planted in 1932.
32?
Yeah.
All three? Like,
Yeah.
about? They're all that old?
Those one, this one.
This one.
Okay.
How many parcels do you have in Clos du Roi?
3.4 hectares.
That's a lot, yeah.
It doesn't matter to have 3.4 hectares in Clos du Roi. It's nothing.
How big is it?
The total size of the vineyard is big, huh?
28.
Wow.
28 and 35 for Longerois.
Okay.
And this vine is only horse plowed.
And is it mostly all Resvité, Ledois?
Yeah, everywhere. Clos du Roi is only made of this.
It's beautiful.
Bon, ben moi, hein, on va y aller? Ah, look, this one is marvelous. It's lovely. It's the marcotage.
The gobelet plus the marcotage.
Bon, puis tu vois, and this vine is not. Oh, je me rappelle jamais du mot rogné.
Trimmed.
It's not
Hedged or trimmed.
Yeah. As the vigor is low, it doesn't grow very quickly.
Can we talk a bit more about the non-trimming?
Tu veux parler du non-rognage un peu?
C'est que c'est tordu, ça me rappelle mes cheveux en fait.
It reminds him of his hair.
You don't cut the apex either.
Yeah, my hairdresser has closed because of me. I never go. No, it's a method we have a bit. It's quite fashionable right now, but I think it's not stupid. It's thanks to it's Lelobis who has developed it. But I like it because I think it's very important to keep the last bud, the main bud, to organize the plant. It's this bud that controls the growth, that controls the look. There are absolutely no secondary branches. Entrecœur, Paul.
Laterals.
Ah, lateral, okay. And as this was, the grapes are always very lighty, and it's perfect for me. The growth and the physiology of the vine is completely different. If you cut the branches, if you trim, you take off the bud, and there's not anymore this control, but it's an hormonal control that controls the plant. And it means that the plant will grow with other branches that will be lateral and that will give more compact leaves, and this way you can be more sensitive to mildew, to rot, to things like this. It's crazy. The wines are so different. The yields are lower with wedges like this and with trimming.
And someone said once that if you let the top grow, part of the goal is to try to encourage the roots to go deeper. Like if you grow the top, the bottom will balance out.
Certainly, it's normal because it's told that a tree is higher outside than inside. there's the same quantity of wood inside than outside. And if you have more wood, if your vine is higher, you will certainly have more woods. And it's normal, because the more higher plants means more leaves. More leaves means more transpiration, more water, more production of sugar. So it's normal. The wines with this method are fresher than the trimmed ones.
Fresher.
Yeah, not on the analysis, but testing on laboratories are contradictory. I am an enologist, and I say it. It's incredible. How can you explain that?
So, do you ever find that there's more minerality in the untrimmed?
No, more freshness and more expression.
Okay.
Minerality will come with those soils.
Okay.
More density?
Yes, and smoother tannins. The tannins are very soft. Yeah, but the terroir can be alive with trimming like this. Yeah. It's the soil, it's not the plant.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, look, the neighbor, look at the soil. You can see the grass detail over there. It's easier than me. Come on.
Sylvain grabs a handful of soil from his vineyard for us to inspect.
Ooh. I like the looks of this.
De quoi?
C'est bon.
Elle aime bien la tournure que ça prend.
Tiens, tu le prends, puis vous le sentez.
Oh God.
Oh, it smells great. Wow.
Voilà.
Smell that?
Puis ça colle, vous allez voir, ça va vous coller au doigt.
And a handful of conventionally farmed soil from his neighbor to compare.
Same soil. Alive, dead.
Yeah,
Fun to smell.
yeah. I mean, this I could smell from here. I
like
can't smell
wafts.
anything. That's wild. That is wild.
We hop back in his van and head to Longerois.
Oui. Scooby-Doo. Viens. Viens, Scooby.
What's the first stage of frostbite?
Everything in Marsannay is a little bit backwards. Here, the vines are threatened by the constantly creeping urban sprawl of the city of Dijon. As we enter the northernmost parts of Marsannay, we're suddenly jolted out of the pastoral days of the Côte d'Or. Here, the stone cabots in the vineyards are not preserved ruins or elaborately decorated chapels, but are covered in bright, bold graffiti.
We don't know who made this, but it's marvelous.
It's super nice.
It's Salvador Dali.
Yeah.
And qui sait déguster ne boit plus jamais de vin, mais goûte des secrets.
The quote reads, "He who knows how to taste does not drink wine, but savors secrets," by Salvador Dali.
Planted in 1927. They are ligotés from Longerois.
Wow.
There were many stocks missing, and we made the same with the Massal selections. We have replaced many ones.
And you're going pistol?
Yeah, it has never been put in wires, so I didn't want to put stakes on wires, and I made this. I left the peach tree, and I will replant in many of my vines some trees. I love trees.
The Clair's oldest Marsannay vines are somewhere around here too, huh?
Yeah.
26, I think.
Here it's finot. There's only gravels that fell down, some alluvial cone. And here, look the land. It's darker than here. I don't want it to be clean. I want to keep some small trees for the birds, for the rabbits, for
the bats,
the birds. Tu veux descendre, Paul?
Elle veut descendre 2 minutes.
And there is half of Pinot that goes in Fleur de Pinot and half of Aligoté. You've got a friend.
They're like Dr. Seuss vines. They like each one has its like total personality and
T'as vu les Pinots,
shape and
Pinot, Aligoté. No leaves anymore on Pinot Noir. And Aligoté still some. They are dead, but
it's more vigorous.
Salut.
Back in the cellar, the journey continues. a visit with Sylvain almost always takes the better part of a day.
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo. Oh, Sona.
Time contracts in the tiny cellar beneath his house, where the barrels are covered in hieroglyphics drawn by his 2 small children.
C'est que c'est humide en fait. C'est pour ça qu'on est.
Everything's vinified without sulfur. Now, Sylvain is an enologist. He will intervene if he has to. I think more than what he actually does is the aesthetic of the wines, because he doesn't systematically do anything. The style of the wine is like 3 notches away of natty natty, with incredible, openness. But there's so much to talk about with Sylvain.
Alice.
Bonjour. Alice is the artist.
No, the youngest. She's 11. Lucy is 14. You want to try a few 21s?
And again, it's hard to explain exactly what goes on. We taste and taste, a series of a dozen experiments before the real tasting begins. There's rosé, not to be confused with the Chardonnay rose, then 8 Pinots, then the Chardonnays, and then the main event, the single vineyard aligotés.
These ones are experiments, because the first, but I already prepare 4 aligotés. Ouais.
Sylvain, are you the only cellar in Burgundy where you can do an aligoté terroir tasting?
No, there's Jérôme.
That's true, Jérôme Galéron.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he has multiple.
With larger terroirs than me, because at home you can try Bouzeron, Bzz, Chardonnay rose.
C'est bon, hein?
If you want to come? That's okay? Yeah. So, aligoté. Yeah.
As we say in French, ça suffit les conneries. Enough fucking around.
How do I say it again?
Ça suffit les conneries. In the single vineyards that are, not secret, there are 2 on the lower slope, Chamforret and Auvon du Pépé, which we saw. And then the 2 others, Clos du Roi and Charmar-Prêtre, are slope aligotés, and that's very rare because most people pull them out. Only Marsannay, because it got its village appellation so late, that's why there's old vines on the slopes. And it's a real treasure, because we can see what aligoté can do on,
Do you do that here?
Do you
With the aligoté and Chardonnay, if you, on the same terroir, if you taste them blind?
Yes, but we have them on Chambertin, and it's a bit like the children. You can't say which one is the best because they are so different. I have the same on Chambertin with aligoté on Chardonnay. I love both. It's a great terroir, but I love both, but they are so different. On Chambertin, Chardonnay is very strong, very energetic, It moves very much.
You even have Pinot on Chambertin.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as Fleur de Pinot.
Aligoté needs ripeness, draining soils. It's better.
Yeah. Not the bottom of the slope soils?
No, obviously not. And we always say aligoté is modest, but it's normal. It was planted in Charlemagne, it's not anymore. It was planted in Meursault, it was planted in Premier Crus, in Grand Crus. It was planted in the top of Chambertin, it has disappeared. Can you say the best Bâtard Montrachet come from Bourgogne Blanc at the bottom of Poligny? No. It's normal. The best Chardonnay are not made behind the road. Even in Vaughan, Pinot from the plain are not Grand Cru. There's something that is completely impossible. You won't be able to do it. But imagine a blend between both, like it was in Charlemagne. It's just perfect. Chardonnay gives the strength to aligoté, and aligoté gives the tightness and freshness.
I think Chardonnay needs aligoté more than aligoté needs Chardonnay.
But in the old vines of Chardonnay, you often have some aligoté plants. You often have sometimes Pinot Blanc, but not very often. But you have some aligoté in the old vines of Chardonnay. And in the old vines of aligoté, you never have Chardonnay. Never. It's always pure.
also imagine if you had wanted the opportunity to work in other villages, you would have taken it, right? Like,
Yeah, maybe. I could have done, but I'm free. I'm free, and there are my roots. I couldn't believe that my estate could be so big and with so lovely parcels, with Clos du Roi, Longeroy. At the beginning, it was difficult on the first 3-4 years, and yes, it's a dream for me. All of them, all the other ones, all varieties in my village where my grandfather was born. I have we have the book. My grandfather was one grower. It was small, but in 1904, 1905, they had 4 hectares. It was great for the period. And it has stopped because of wars, because of divisions, because of many things.
Eventually, Sylvain leaves to go grab an old diary of sorts.
I don't find the picture, but tiens, regarde, c'est le journal. Look.
1902. Oh wow.
02, 04.
I'm going to take a picture. C'est des carnets de... C'est des...
C'est mon arrière-grand-père.
Great-great-grandfather. Chamforêt, look at that. Avoine.
And it's funny because they had the same parcels than me. 1903.
Vendez-vent.
They had sold in December 1903 to Mr. Thieu. Certainly paid on the 3 of June. 21 francs, je pense. Pataille Pierre, 1 pièce et demie. Une feuillette.
Oh, they're in barrels. They're selling in barrels or half barrels.
Mr. Lenoir. 1 barrel to Mr. Lenoir.
Beautiful. 1906, great vintage.
Et tu vois l'écriture qui change. You see the writing is not the same. Maybe because it's somebody else. Maybe the son or... Après ça, tu vois, 1913, là par contre.
The war.
Yeah.
1914 is the war. Oh, nothing.
Nothing.
Wow.
Tu vois, maybe some children.
A kid, yeah.
We could imagine it's children who have written this. For example, children who are very old ladies.
So there was nothing between which year? 1914?
13, 14, 16.
1929.
Actually, oh yeah.
Oh, very good. They have sold 235 kilograms of black currant. And they have been paid for subvention gelée, for frost. They had some money from government. Regarde. They have bought a pig. Acheté a sulfur powder for the vines.
It's crazy.
Voilà.
And now you have your cell phone ringing. Different time.
Thank you for showing us.
Before leaving, he insists we must try his ratafia, made from Marc de Bourgogne. It's been many hours, things are a little hazy, and we've completely missed dinner.
I hate this normally. It's called ratafia.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy world, it's chaotic. It's this incredible mix of chaos, of incredible knowledge, of incredible talent, of fun, of joy, of education. Wow. And this incredible array of wines that are atypical. And it's a wild ride that is every time the most joyful experience. It's a circus. It's a crazy circus in the most beautiful way. It's why we do this. Is to be with people like Sylvain that surprise you, that are generous with their knowledge, with their wine, with their laughter. You know, that's why we do this. People like Sylvain.
Yeah.
Merci encore.
Merci. De young.
Time goes by so slow.
Thank you to our guests, Bruno, Arthur, and Eduard Clair, Jean-Marie Fourrier, Amélie Berthaut, and Sylvain Pataille. Thank you to Paul Wasserman and Helen Johannesen for your commentary, guidance, and expertise. Our main source for historical and technical information is Inside Burgundy by Jasper Morris, and our geological information comes from the local geologic expert, Françoise Vanier. Make sure to stay tuned next month for the final episode of Season 2. This season of Roadside Terroir is made possible by our Season 2 partners, Becky Wasserman & Co., La Palais, and Acker Wines. Thank you to Lone Wolf Imports for sponsoring this episode. Roadside Terroir is hosted and produced by me, Brenna Quigley, recording and sound engineering by Nick Canepa, and original music and sound design by Jeff Alvarez. This season wouldn't be possible without the support from all of you. Check out our website, roadsideterroir.com, to learn how you can stay in touch and how to help support this season by donating, sponsoring, or becoming a Roadside Insider. We'd like to extend a special thank you to our Grand Cru patrons, Steve and Amy Lipin. Thank you for making this episode possible. Thank you to Esa Eslami, Jerusha Frost, Ali Massie, Julia Wiggin, Summer Stabe, Michelle Jolie, Michael Sager, and everyone else who helped make this episode a reality.
Scooby, stop.
Do you want to taste? Because it's...
Scooby, là. Non. Non.
Or do you want to just...
Scooby-Doo.
Not taste and...
Scooby.
No, we should taste
Viens là. Dépêche-toi, viens là.
Okay, we can talk
Tu viens là.
about some of these things.
Allez. Stop, assis. Stop. Stop, assis. Scooby. Viens là. Scooby, là. Là, allez. There was a small dog. Viens là. Scooby, viens là. Là.